Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1356, The Right Affinity. Carl's attempts to ingratiate himself with the elders were not going nearly as well as Kara's attempts to make friends among the children. After the suspended atomic wedgie incident, as the kids were calling it, she had many admirers, and even Rue was getting more respect among her peers for being the new cool kid's friend. If she was good enough for Kara now that she had a class, then she wasn't all bad. No matter what her bully brothers said, she wasn't the only one that they picked on, just the easiest target. But they couldn't do anything with Kara here. She might be their size in humanoid form, but the power differential was immense. "Did you come with Carl as an assistant?" one of the girls, a sand dragon, asked. Kara shrugged. "Yes, but also no. I help Carl. But that's not the reason that I got to come along on this trip. I have an affinity for void magic, as does Princess Rue. So I can help teach her. I was actually born a winged void badger, and evolved into a chaos badger as my understanding improved. So I've got many skills that can help her in the early stages of her training. That's too cool. Everyone wants void magic, but almost nobody has an affinity for it." The girl sighed. Kara nodded. "You are an earth and fire element mage, right?" The girl shook her head. "No, wind and fire." "Oh, that is interesting. I totally thought that you would be earth element, as a sand dragon." The boy who had been sitting beside Kara at dinner gave her a look that had the girl immediately on the defensive. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Kara said that different magic tastes different. He explained. "Put your filthy face near me and I will claw it off." Princess Rue laughed. "She's on to your tricks. You'll never steal a kiss with that level of skill." "Hey, how did I become the one under attack here? I wasn't trying to kiss anyone." The children were all laughing, while the staff supervising them watched quietly from along the walls. For once, the kids were not fighting, not playing power games relying on their family status, and not making ridiculous demands. It was almost relaxing. Once the after-dinner socialization was finished and all the other kids were taken away by their parents, Kara brought Princess Rue back to their room with a promise that she would come to see some of the Noble Dragon's kids the next day. The mission to make Rue well respected was off to a good start, Carl thought. One day with a bit of power, and already there were a few who were treating her like she wasn't a pariah. At the very least, they were likely setting her up on the path where she didn't become an immortal rank nightmare for the whole nation. But then, you never really knew. Perhaps making her a small group of friends and giving her some power was what caused her to rampage, not the awakening from rage that she was about to do when they arrived. Fortunately, he didn't know anything about history, or whether the nation actually deserved a good scourging, so Carl wasn't too concerned about failure. The pressure to win just wasn't there. "Mr. Carl, can we train skills now? You're not tired, are you?" Rue pleaded. Carl winked at the sugar-fueled dragonkin. "Fear not. There is plenty of training coming tonight. First, you don't know anything about combat or efficient mana use, so we're starting from the basics." Then he activated Illusionary Domain, and turned the spare bedroom into a large combat training facility with targets along one wall and training dummies moving back and forth. "Now, have you found a sneaky chance to cast the spell yet?" he asked. Rue shook her head. "I don't know how dangerous it is, so I didn't try." "In that case, go ahead and cast it on the dummies. Focus the energy in your body as you think of the skill and where you want it to target." Kara demonstrated with an ascended rank Void Blast, the same spell that Rue was going to be using. "Oh, that's what it does. That's pretty awesome." A second later, a rather weak version exploded at the training dummy, but missed to the left as the dummy moved. Perhaps moving targets is too high of difficulty at the start. You can go for the stationary targets. The little dragonkin growled in frustration, and Kara quietly laughed. That was what she needed. A bit of motivation. The next Void Blast exploded over the training dummy, and then two more. The targeting wasn't perfect, but she was at least hitting them, which was better than most beginner mages managed for weeks. She was a natural talent at this, and her power level was starting to come up as she practiced. But she was still using too much energy, and Carl could see that she was starting to get tired after only a few minutes of constant casting. "Take a seat, relax and drink this. The body only holds so much mana, and you need to know what it feels like to deplete it. If you go too far, you'll make yourself pass out." Carl explained. Is that how mages fight? They just throw a couple spells then take a break? Rue asked. Carl shook his head. Magical stamina is the weak point of mages. Takes time to learn, and until they do, warriors can defend until they're tired then beat them up. So we are going to work on your targeting, your spell power, and your stamina all at once. Once you have mastered hitting moving targets, I will create smarter targets for you to fight. Then, once you have mastered that, I will have you do it while flying. Why while flying? She asked. It simulates defensive spell use, a constant draw on your mana and focus while you fight. You need to stay mobile and keep your defensive abilities up while in combat. Then, once you can do all those things, we will see about teaching you some new spells, or even a skill to help you. Do you have a goal? Something you want to do in life? Carl suggested. Princess Rue nodded eagerly, then frowned. Is it bad if I say that I want vengeance? I want to end their arrogant bullying culture. Plenty of young dragons leave the city to live in the smaller towns simply because they were a bit slow growing up. It's not just dragonkin like me, even the real dragons get the same horrible treatment if they're like me. Kara wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I think that we might be able to help you with that. All you need is the right support and enough power to make all the changes you could want. Carl sighed. They were definitely on the path of chaos. Chapter 1357 Fashion of the Times. That night, they practiced until not even a mana pylon could bring enough energy back to Princess Rue to get her up off the ground. All right, Kara will tuck you into bed. This lovely maid will wake everyone up in the morning for breakfast, and then we will spend the day working on your stamina. Now sleep well, Carl announced. Rue nearly cried in relief. He looked so friendly, but the Carl was an evil taskmaster. But the one who was the most shocked was the maid on duty. She had just watched a girl who had awakened her system for the first time be drilled into a trainee battle mage who could hit randomly moving targets with Void Blast. But Princess Rue's power had grown from low ascended to the bottleneck before commander rank. Locally, it was known as servant rank, as that was the standard to even apply as a palace servant. But progressing through most of a rank by brute force and mana overload was an insane training technique that not even their military leaders would consider. The fact that it had been used on a princess was difficult to accept. More importantly, it had worked. And the princess didn't seem any worse for wear because of it. Dawn came far too early, and Rue rolled over in bed to find that she was wrapped around something large and furry. Kara had transformed back to sleep, but hadn't been willing to go back to her space when there was a perfectly good living pillow available. Rue tried to get up, but the badger shifted, and a contented rumbling vibrated her chest as Kara's dream was interrupted. Excuse me, can I get up? She whispered. Kara opened one eye, then harumphed and lay back down. Please? I have to pee. Those were magic words, and Kara reluctantly got up, but grabbed Rue in her claws to fly her over to the bathroom. The maid dodged as she was almost run down by a badger carrying a small dragonkin. This job is going to need a drink, she muttered to herself. Carl came out in a simple black silk housecoat with sleep pants. Oh, I see that the little one is up already. Good, that saves time. Please call for breakfast to be brought to the suite. Or are we expected in the dining room? All royals and emissaries are expected at breakfast and dinner services, unless traveling with a spouse. The maid replied. Carl sighed. I should have brought my Dana mage. The maid frowned. What is a Dana mage? From the bathroom, Carl laughed. It's his wife. It's better that she's not here. She's too adorable, and it always causes trouble. The maid gave Carl a confused look, and he shrugged. She's not wrong. I married a divine fox beastkin. Fox charm is insanely overpowered at mythic rank, and the totem-ranked guild challenge on my tabard is directly because another guild wanted to recruit her by force. The maid bowed, and finally realized what Carl was wearing. Sir, would you like for us to prepare suitable clothing for breakfast? Carl shook his head and changed into a black suit that matched the wings of his Tengu form. This should be suitable for breakfast. It's a good thing that the transformation spell works with bonded clothing, as I don't normally have wings in humanoid form. The style of the suit was strange, far different from the layered robes that Carl was wearing yesterday. Is that something from home, or from a distant land? I have not seen a suit like it before, the maid asked, so different that she wasn't even sure how to decide if it met dress code. It had 3 layers, but did they count? And what was around his neck? Carl sighed, and changed into layered robes again. The maid smiled. Yes, that is perfect, if a bit dated. Most in NAR Palace wear black as the outer layer, with gray underneath to honor the shadow dragons, but it does go quite well with the red base. Carl smiled at her. I thought about using Chaos Realm Silver as the color of choice for the underlayers, but I have been told that others cannot see it. Wouldn't that be awkward? Showing up in my most beautiful robes, only to have everyone think I was naked. The maid looked scandalized. then began to laugh as she realized that Carl was serious. Wait, there are colors that not even dragons can see? She asked. Only certain dragons. You need to have an affinity to the chaos plane to be able to see it. I can, and Kara can, but most of my mythic-ranked guild members and friends cannot. It's a bit of a pain, as the Supreme Lady wanted to use it as a wedding dress for my bride. But most of the guests would not be able to see the fabric. Carl announced with a dramatic sigh. The maid blinked slowly as the implications of that sunk into her mind. Oh my! I have had nightmares about that exact thing. I had the most fantastic and impossibly beautiful wedding dress. Then halfway down the aisle, I realized I was naked. She whispered. Kara laughed from the shower. See, your mind knows something that you do. Not. I told the Dana mage that all she really needed to do to get her man was just show up naked and wait for his will to break. But she informed me that was not how things worked. I even asked Sister Opal, and she agreed. Is Sister Opal a green dragon cleric? The maid asked. Good guess, but no. She's a butterfly, Kara called through the closed door. Carl smiled at the flustered worker. I don't think that any of the nature clerics would have argued with her, though. They're quite pragmatic about such things, and entirely too fond of fox-type beastkin. It's the tail fluff, you see. The maid smiled. It's a common weakness of the green dragons and those like them. Chapter 1358 Still Part Troll. The trip down to breakfast was a shorter one than yesterday's flight to dinner. Only 2 staircases and a hallway brought them directly to one of the doors. The moment that they entered, Kara and Rue were surrounded by young dragons who had questions for them, and had very clearly been directed by their parents to make friends with the princess now that she was showing promise. Soon, Carl would have to teach the young princess about politics, or at least find out how much she understood. Letting Kara teach her how to deal with annoying people was funny, but probably not the wisest of ideas. It would almost always end in some level of violence, and until Rue was more powerful than her opponents, that should be the last resort. You have ideas that are better than violence? Kara asked. I'm working on it. The girls were dragged to a large table full of kids, and Carl found himself cornered by Librarian Barry and Crown Prince Lucas. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to see you this morning. Will you be joining me for breakfast? He asked. I do believe that we will. The librarian tells me that you have a most curious ability. Prince Lucas agreed. Carl laughed. Yes, you could call it that, though it's more of a prank skill than anything. You see, it has rather extreme limitations. If this place wasn't full of dragons, it would be nearly useless. The librarian looked like he wanted to take actual notes as Carl was speaking, but the prince led them to a small table for 4 people in the corner of the room. Then he called over an ancient dragon whose scent seemed entirely too familiar to Carl, but who he couldn't quite place. It was very close to being someone that he should identify immediately, but it was just slightly different in a way that was confusing his senses. His nameplate said that his name was Decarion, but Carl didn't recall seeing or hearing that one before. Mythic Lord Carl, it's a pleasure to meet you. I am the current avatar of the Black Dragon in this world. It's a rare occasion to meet another avatar, but I am told that the young Princess Rue has become the Void Avatar candidate for this generation. That's 2 in one day, a new record in my 5 millennia holding this title, he explained. So, it is more than just a class title? My understanding was that the class was more shamanistic in nature, but focused on the void element. Carl asked. The avatar of the Black Dragon smiled. You could call it shamanistic, or perhaps we are a form of cleric. Certainly, we can use the magic that is holy to our patron. If my guess is right, you have an affinity for living things and creation magic. Carl nodded. Good guess. My affinity for creating and summoning grows with every advancement, but my class started out focused on magical beasts. Like a ranger, but far more versatile. Better than the bronze avatar. He started with an inscription class, and then spent centuries as a lawyer before he was chosen. That sounds very bronze dragon of him. Carl agreed. The Crown Prince chuckled. That it was. However, I'm more interested in your skills. Do you really think that you can get Rue up to a standard that will make her a respectable royal? I really don't see that being an issue. Give me a couple of weeks and I will make a royal rank mage out of her and max out her mana affinity growth rate. I won't stick around forever, but I might stay until her class advances, just to see what happens if I teach her some interesting new skills. Carl suggested. Prince Lucas sighed. That is what I was afraid you'd say. Carl turned to Decarion. That's why you're here, isn't it? Every time that I have a fun idea, black dragons start appearing like dungeon mobs spawning on a wave timer. The Crown Prince frowned. What sort of shenanigans do you get up to that attract multiple black dragons? The Black Dragon avatar smiled. World dragons are innately attuned to life and chaos, while we are attuned to death and order. Where they are, we must be. Carl nodded. He has a point. Even though this trip isn't intended to cause a single casualty, there is still a rather significant chance that someone will start doing dumb stuff nearby. I'm practically a magnet for it. The Crown Prince looked toward the door that the king had come through last night. It's best we don't speak of that. Someone might take it the wrong way. But that might change soon. I hear that father is not happy with the queen today. He whispered. Carl shrugged. I would be annoyed, but it's all in the past. I will just keep the protective spells on my young charge, and it's unlikely that anyone will manage to harm her. Is that why the princess has an eternal lightning barrier? Just to see if anyone tries to break it? Dicarion asked. I thought about using disintegrate, but it doesn't differentiate between hostile and friendly contact. Carl joked. I know that you didn't actually plan to do that. I would have seen that level of death toll. The black dragon avatar reminded him. You're supposed to play along. Look how horrified the next table looks. The thought of an angry ball of mythic ranked disintegrate loose in the castle on a mission to hug everyone who had ever wronged her was enough to give most of them the cold sweats. Librarian Barry cleared his throat. If I might interject, where did you learn the skill that you taught me yesterday? It seems tailor-made for blue dragons, but I've never heard of it before. Carl frowned. How can you not have heard of it? It's the base racial skill of lightning Saro. The librarian stared back, too confused to speak. That makes no sense. You can't learn other species' innate skills. Unless you're an avatar of the world dragon. Dicarion corrected. Carl smiled. That was the perfect excuse. It covered anything and everything that he did. But also what he didn't do. Chapter 1359 Future Preparations. What sort of future should I be preparing the princess for? I mean, now that you know I can help her advance her rank to her potential in a reasonable time frame. Carl asked, diverting the conversation again. What sort of potential will she even have? Perhaps she can be a palace officer by the time that she's 100. That would be fairly decent, but at best, she might get a handful of marriage offers from rural nobles. The Crown Prince noted. Carl shook his head. No, she should be able to reach mythic or at least totem in the next century. She's half-elf. She's not stuck on a dragon's slow growth rate. Elves mature slowly, but their power levels grow pretty smoothly. You know, that matches Father's theory. You see, dragons reach puberty relatively quickly. Elves reach puberty slowly. But elves' power grows faster in the years during and immediately after puberty, while a dragon's rate of growth increases with time. He insists that once she starts to grow, she should grow quickly, and then keep growing at an increasing rate until she reaches her peak. Prince Lucas explained. Not a bad theory. I honestly don't remember how it works out. Usually, it's the orcs and the beastkin who want to do lewd things with cute elf girls. A woman at the next table choked on her drink at Carl's comment, while the rest of her table did their best to pretend that they weren't eavesdropping. Not that any conversation was private in a room full of dragons with sensitive hearing. Behind Carl, the king mentally smirked. The strange emissary had a point. Elf girls did have a thing for guys a meter taller than them, with arms the size of their torso. But that was a good description of his humanoid form. How such a preference had emerged in a species where the men were only marginally less effeminate than the women, he had no idea. But he was deeply thankful for it. Even if it had caused him years of headaches with the queen. Why she had so vehemently opposed adding the elf to the harem when she hadn't objected to any of the 10 other dragons was a mystery not made for a man's comprehension. However, he didn't show any outward sign that he could hear the quiet conversation between his eldest son and the others. But back to your initial question. If she really can reach totem rank before adulthood, her status will be much higher than expected, and she will likely end up with a royal marriage. Lucas explained. Oh? Married off to one of the other nations is a decent option. Librarian Barry laughed, while Prince Lucas looked a bit embarrassed. Well, that is a possibility. However, if she has that sort of power as a dragonkin, it will more likely be a dragon from one of the branch families, a distant cousin. He explained. Ah, keeping the shadow dragon bloodline strong. Well, as long as it's not one of her own siblings, I suppose that tradition is tradition. Carl replied. The 3 men at the table all gave Carl confused looks. You know that sort of genetic issue doesn't happen to dragons, right? Dicarion asked curiously. Well, yeah, but still. There are entire novels written about why you shouldn't love your sister that much. Carl countered. You've definitely been hanging out with the green dragon clerics. Librarian Barry noted. But on our initial point, I don't think that it will be an issue for me to get her to totem rank before adulthood. Depending on how slowly she matures, it might be well in advance of adulthood, and then it will all be down to her comprehension rates. Carl explained. The blue dragon nodded. With good tutors, that shouldn't be an issue. After all, dragons have a natural advantage over most species when it comes to comprehending the fundamental rules. Carl nodded. Beasts are the same way. They instinctively understand the elements that they are aligned to, and the issue is getting their body ready for the advancement. Are you good with younglings, then? Crown Prince Lucas asked. Carl smiled while Kara laughed. Say yes, we might get a baby dragon. I can't deny it. My class gives me a rather strong affinity for hatchlings of all sorts. I've had Kara with me since she was just a young girl, wandering the world hungry and harassed by orcs. Carl replied, But how is your hatchling doing? I believe that you were planning to give the gift I presented to your youngest. Carl asked. My first and youngest, as it was. Her egg looks ready to crack, but she's not hatched yet. However, soaking the shell in the potion you provided was exactly what she needed. The innate power level advanced to commander rank without any issues. Lucas explained. That is wonderful news. If I'm still here when she hatches, let me know, and I will help her get started. Carl suggested. Dicarion got a confused look on his face, then frowned. I have a message from my god for you, I think. He began. Everyone, even the tables around them and the king himself, turned to stare in rapt attention as the god of death conveyed a message to someone through their avatar. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The black dragon cleared his throat, then shook his head before speaking. You cannot have a baby dragon. Carl smirked, while Kara howled with laughter, then thumped the table before holding her middle and tilting out of her chair, still laughing as she hit the floor. You know, I seem to recall that I have been told that before, but I'm not trying to steal your baby dragon. I will just pet her and cuddle her and teach her wonderful new skills, Carl announced. Crown Prince Lucas slowly began to smile as the shock wore off. You know, I never thought that I would say this, but the death god makes an excellent point. You should not be allowed to have a baby dragon. Carl sighed dramatically. Think of all the spectacular things I could teach if I started from scratch. Without wasting all those years on basic schooling, we could get right into trade skills, system activations, flying lessons. Dicarion glanced at Kara, then smiled. Yes, I understand many things with greater clarity now. Did you know that the gods also demanded that Supreme Lady Matilda gave up all her clutches to the red dragons to raise, though she fully intended to raise most of them herself? Kara laughed even harder at the thought of what a baby dragon would turn out like if Carl or Matilda were actually allowed to raise them unsupervised. With the wise guidance of Sister Ray and the Dana Mage, surely it wouldn't end too badly. But the Supreme Lady or Carl alone? That was a disaster waiting to happen. Chapter 1360 Curiosity and Kindness. From the back of the room, small wings fluttered, and a red dragon flew over to inspect Carl after escaping from her nanny. He doesn't look scary. There's no sense of violent intentions from him at all, she insisted, landing on his shoulder. Carl stroked the little dragon's head, and took a bit of roasted frog from Hawkspace to feed her. The hatchling tore into it with savage eagerness, and then hiccuped and passed out as the flood of mana filled her body. See? Aren't they adorable? She just advanced from awakened to ascended, Librarian Barry noted. She was already at the bottleneck, but I've got more frog legs if we need them. They are part of the plan to get Princess Rue back on schedule. Carl agreed. Dicarion sighed and took the sleeping dragon off Carl's shoulder. I get it now. The whole balance of the world will be overturned if you get to have baby dragons. 30 seconds and they're starting to advance. 30 minutes, and they'll likely be awakening system interfaces before they can even fly straight or understand cause and effect relationships. Then what? A whole army of loyal whelplings that will follow the avatar of the world dragon instead of their own gods. That's what. Carl waved his hand, trying to dismiss the other avatar's words. But Kara's laughter was infectious, and the rest of the dragons in the room were beginning to laugh along with her. The god of death is a god of order, everything in its time and place. The only thing that is more likely to upset them than a chaos dragon is a time dragon. Librarian Barry noted. Carl cleared his throat nervously. Right, can't let them know that you've been sent here from the future. No matter how funny it is to play with the baby dragons. I promised that I would behave and not turn this whole mission into one huge mess. But as my mission is to help Princess Rue catch up to her potential and get the respect she deserves, there will likely be some surprise advancements. He informed the others. Too late. I pumped her full of mana all night, and she's going to advance before lunch. Kara added. As long as it's not here in the breakfast hall, we should be fine. The nanny came over with an indulgent smile on her face while she began to gently disentangle the sleeping dragon from Dicarion's robes. She was an expert, and knew not to let the sleeping hatchling grab hold of him again after she got one paw free. So the process was completed in seconds, and the sleepy little red dragon was relocated. Avatar, thank you for putting the little one down for her nap. Sorry for the intrusion, she muttered. The woman was into her later middle years and still a monarch-ranked red dragon, so her status was presumably low, compared to the mythic-ranked men at the table. But she was one of the palace's best nannies, trusted enough to work directly with the children of the senior staff members. No need to apologize. The World Dragon avatar provoked this incident. Carl nodded. This one is definitely on me. I didn't realize that there were curious young ears around when I was making jokes. Kara returned to her seat and noticed that the way the other children looked at Rue was different. Gone was the old disdain for her status, and it was replaced with a mix of mild envy and anticipation. Why don't we all get together for some group training on the weekend? I know that nobody wants to be training on their day off, but if we do it as a group, it could be fun. Kara suggested. The kids looked to each other for confirmation. They loved to challenge each other to games and trials. It was the unofficial method for determining the hierarchy of the young dragons within the palace. Even if Rue wasn't there, they wouldn't object. That sounds wonderful. What time do you think? Princess Rue, could we do it in the morning? So we can go until lunch? One of the girls asked. Rue beamed with excitement at being asked her opinion. First thing after breakfast sounds really good. Then we have time for multiple contests before lunch. Everyone gets pulled away to do things in the afternoon, so morning is definitely best. With their plans made, all the children began to go their separate ways, and Carl took that as his cue to return to their quarters so that he could start Princess Rue on a proper training regimen. There was so much that she had never learned, and that the nation didn't seem to be teaching any of their young royals. Perhaps it was intended to be reserved for those who were going into military service, as they were 1,000 years into the resurgence, and things were relatively stable. But if Carl was going to teach Rue to be all that she could be, and a serious contender for the throne, she would need to know it all. Once they were back in their room, Carl created a new illusionary domain for Rue to train in. Alright, first I need to know if you've been taking all the lessons on etiquette, laws, history and geography that a princess and future ruler should have. If you want to get vengeance and be above all the people who bullied you, you will have to know those things. Carl began. Rue nodded. Librarian Barry is quite helpful when you ask him to learn a new thing. I might not have gotten all the specialty tutors that most of my siblings did, but I did get free access to the library, and I did my basic schooling with the Red Dragon matron like everyone else. Carl smiled. Wonderful, then we don't need to go over the basics so early in the day. The most important part of gaining support is proving to others that you have the power to back up your words. Or, in this case, the potential. Nobody expects you to make it to mythic rank right away. What they will want to see is that you have the potential to make it there when you are grown, and the wisdom to manage situations so that they work in your favor. Those are skills that it would be better if someone local taught you, as I know very little about the situation within the palace. So what I will teach you is how to use your magic in both the subtle and flashy ways. One to get things done. The other, to show off for a crowd and remind them that you are not weak, even if you have been lenient. Chapter 1361 Watch and Learn. The thought of using magic in new ways was wonderful to Rue, but it also caught the attention of a certain someone who had been lingering outside their door. Librarian Barry, welcome. Would you like to join us? Carl asked as he sensed the dragon about to knock. The blue dragon stared in wonder at the open field that Carl had turned the apartment into. That would be lovely. I see that you already started with the showing off your power portion of the lesson. The blue dragon replied, unashamed of being caught eavesdropping. Then, a second dragon appeared at the end of the hall, and Crown Prince Lucas followed the librarian into the room. Oh, this is wonderful, isn't it? The illusions feel so real. I can even smell the flowers in the clearing. Avatar, I do hope you won't mind if I sit in on the training session, he asked. Of course not. It's not secret knowledge, even if it is private tutoring. Carl agreed. Now Rue, Kara just used a spell on you? Did you notice? Rue frowned at Carl's words. She didn't feel any different, and she hadn't felt any magic. But when she looked down, her pockets were turned inside out. The pocket thing is for dramatics. The pilfer spell is a most wonderful bit of sorcery, which I will teach you soon. When others are looking to make trouble for you, they will often seek to plant evidence, or steal a valuable item that has been left in your care. But with the pilfer spell, you can discreetly remove it from them and place it in your storage. If the incriminating evidence is not found where they say it will be, it doesn't take long for others to realize that the whole thing was a setup. Now, Sister Kara is a master at placing items in others' pockets as well, but that is not a skill that I would ask a princess to learn. Nor is it one that would be officially approved by any royal court. So, the next thing that you are going to need is a confidant. If you have one person that you can trust implicitly, they can take care of the dirty work for you. Crown Prince Lucas chuckled as Carl finished his speech, and Rue turned to him with eager eyes. Is what he says true? Do you have a person like that? She pleaded. Lucas smiled and patted her on the head. Of course I do. You know Nyx. Rue frowned. I thought that Nyx was your consort? Like, your mistress, but without the fake promises or the intention to marry. Lucas' face went suspiciously blank, while Librarian Barry began to laugh. Princess, Nyx is not a lady of the court. Nyx is an incubus with a fondness for bold and dramatic makeup. The blue dragon explained softly. Princess Rue just shrugged. Is there a difference? My mother was an elf. Kara walked over to whisper in her ear. All incubi are boys. The females of the species are called a succubus. Nyx is a boy? No. He's too cute. Not possible. She blurted out, which finally cracked Prince Lucas' composure. Oh, this is priceless. I'm going to have to tell him later. Lucas began, before noticing the gleam in Rue's eye. She was definitely thinking something age-inappropriate. But really, Princess Rue was mentally calculating where she went wrong. Sure, she'd never seen Nyx in a dress. But his hair was spectacular, his accessories perfect, and he moved with a level of cat-like grace that she had been trying for years to emulate so that she didn't embarrass herself during her posture and grace lessons. Being an incubus was an unfair advantage. But where do I find someone like that? She asked after giving up on trying to understand how a mere boy had managed to surpass her skills. Carl patted her shoulder gently. It's not easy to find the perfect person. That level of trust is the hardest thing in the world to truly obtain. However, if you don't have a person like that, you can cheat. You either get someone to swear a binding oath, sign a blood contract, or gain leverage over them that they value more than their life. Alternately, you can do like I do and just summon one, should you gain the skill. Then, he called out the epic guard, who stretched gracefully as she examined the room. Is that a ghostwood treant? Librarian Lucas asked. It's a guardian, a summoned creature, but she patterned herself after a haint. They don't look exactly the same. She looks more like a treant and less spectral, but I have never met a ghostwood treant, so you might be correct. Carl agreed. You met a haint? No, sorry. Please continue your lesson. I will ask my questions after. Barry apologized as he added the question to his notepad. Princess Rue's eyes went vacant as she examined the spells in her class tree. Okay, if I go far enough up the tree, there is a summoned void companion that I can call on. If I keep that active all the time, it can work as my assistant while I look for my own Nyx. She decided. Carl nodded, but Lucas had practical questions. How many skill points will it take to get to that companion? He asked. Rue frowned as she counted. About 100 if I go straight there? It's halfway up the tree. But there are other good things I want, like the Void Step and Void Shield spells that aren't on that branch. So it will be some time before you have it. Perhaps it would be better for us to focus on finding you a suitable person. Normally, they will work as your personal maid, as princesses don't usually have business assistants or butlers. Not that we could allow a butler into your room unattended once you were grown. Lucas added. Finding friends was already difficult, Rue thought. And now she needed a bestie. That wouldn't ever betray her. She had a long way to go. Chapter 1362 Training Scenarios. Carl changed the scene around them and created a room full of illusionary nobles, then smiled at Rue. You won't always have that person with you, even if you find one. So we will start training you in how to do it alone. Prince Lucas, do you mind standing in for our lesson? I need a substitute king to be the target of today's lesson, he asked. Prince Lucas smiled and walked to the throne that was set at the head of the table. Carl nodded. For this lesson, I will first teach you the requisite skill. Then your job is to recover the cursed item before it reaches Prince Lucas. How sharp are your senses? Rue shrugged. Almost as good as a dragon's? Oh right. I meant how are your abilities to detect magic and curses? We will work on those other senses later as well. But I need to know what you can sense so I don't make it too easy. Obviously, the 3 myths in the room will notice the item very quickly, as I'm making it something you should find on your own. We will work up in difficulty later. Carl explained. Oh, in that case, I can feel the ripples in the mana when I'm standing near a magical item. But I can't smell it or anything, like some dragons can. Carl smiled. Perfect. That's a skill that most elves have. They're quite attuned to nature and magic. So, I will make this one easier for you until you understand the process. The goal is to eliminate the item without making a fuss. Sometimes you want the traitor to be exposed. Sometimes you just want to foil them without anyone noticing. Ruining an opportunity will cause them to scramble and make mistakes. Mistakes that will get them into the sort of trouble that they can't lie their way out of. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill pilfer will be transferred to the terrified pushover Rue. Matching skill found in skill tree skill void grab activated. Rue smiled as she read the description of the spell, which had been available on her skill tree before. It was just what it sounded like. The ability to relocate an item with void magic from someone else's person to her inventory. She could also use it to grab items from across the room to bring them into her hand, like a form of telekinesis. The only real restriction seemed to be that she had to be touching the person to move an item in their possession to her inventory. Using it to grab things that were just out of reach seemed way more useful. The illusionary nobles began to mingle, and Kara pushed Rue forward into the crowd to begin her training. The room might all be strangers to her, but Rue had been well trained, and shared a polite greeting with the few people who chose to speak with her, and then smoothly moved along, searching for whatever item Carl had prepared. It was a shiny stone with mana suppression on it that was standing in for a cursed or toxic threat. It should be something that she could detect, and it was definitely one that the others had, as Lucas had looked directly at it when Carl cast the spell, and Barry was scribbling frantically in his notebook. The first guest came up to present Lucas with a gift, and the Crown Prince chuckled as he realized what Carl had done. He had given Rue a timer to work on. Eventually, everyone would have to present their welcoming gifts to the Crown Prince. It had to be done before dinner, so the head of every family or group would be approaching him soon, and handing him their gift, for him to place on the table behind him. Rue circled the room, making small talk as she looked for the item. It didn't take long before she felt the dip in ambient mana around the item, but now that she knew where it was, she had to find a way to discreetly get rid of. The only advantage that she had was that it was in a box. She had some shiny rocks in her pockets, treasures she had been collecting to polish later. The best she could do was rely on them to be a decoy if she should be caught. Using her height to her advantage, Rue simply stepped in front of the guest with the cursed item, and let him run into her back. He had been on his way to the prince, with the box in his hands, and nearly dropped it before a second guest caught Princess Rue's hands and kept them all upright. "My apologies, Princess. I was distracted and didn't see you down there," the man stammered as Rue activated Void Grab and straightened her clothes. With luck, others would think that the spell was one for her appearance, and nobody would notice her attempt to rob the nobleman. "Not entirely your fault, sir. I was entranced by a most lovely necklace and was not paying attention to my surroundings," Rue countered. That was a suitable excuse for a young princess, and the nobleman smiled indulgently before handing her a polished amethyst. "Inexpensive but pretty. As a fellow lover of precious gems, this is my gift to you," he insisted. Rue curtsied and took the stone in both hands, then placed it in the small pouch that hung around her neck. There was no good place for a coin purse in most ladies' fashion, or any pockets. So, the necklace bags were a common accessory here in NAR, allowing the wearer to carry a collection of trinkets without filling their inventory. "Thank you, it is beautiful." Then Rue moved away, looking for a way to get rid of the cursed item before it was discovered missing and someone searched for it. Finding and other similar spells would trace the former contents of a container even if it was in someone's inventory, but they had a very limited range unless cast by someone highly skilled. There, the perfect spot. An empty appetizer tray sitting on a table. Rue brushed by it and slid the item under a soiled napkin, then took a snack off the next tray just as the staff took the empty tray away. Within seconds, the item was out of the room, and Carl ended the scenario. "Excellent work, Princess." Actually bumping into him was a bit clumsy, and caused a larger disturbance than necessary, but it wouldn't have raised immediate suspicions, as you never touched the box, and didn't place a hand on the carrier. Carl congratulated her. "It seems that she has a natural affinity for quick thinking. Disposing of it with the dishes was a brilliant move. They won't be washed until after an event, so if the finding is cast, it will only detect the item in a pile of dishes and not implicate anyone directly," Prince Lucas added. "And that search effort would let everyone see that the item is not what it appears, as it would be in the open." Librarian Barry noted. That hadn't been part of Rue's calculations. She just wasn't going to argue against being given credit. Gone. But she. Chapter 1363 Turn up the difficulty. "Now that you've shown us that you understand the basics of protecting the prince from dangerous items, I will increase the difficulty a little. This time, use magic to cause a distraction, and then destroy the item. Void Blast will do the job, but if you have other ideas, you don't need to use magic," Carl instructed. The scene changed to a garden party, and Librarian Barry took a seat beside the Crown Prince. "This magic is wonderful for education. To think, he can make entire scenarios with a thought, including the guests. It is so far beyond the basic training methods that we use for the kids that I can't wait to see what the challenge on tomorrow's day off looks like," the librarian whispered. "Challenge?" Prince Lucas asked. "I guess you weren't paying attention. The children are gathering for a study session tomorrow, with Princess Rue. You know how that always turns into a contest. But if Lord Carl is going to lead the session, it should be something like this, should it not?" the librarian asked. "Right, a fully illusionary training area instead of the standard training grounds games. That does sound like it will be a lot of fun," Lucas agreed. Rue snapped her fingers and waved at Kara. "Right, we have visitors tomorrow. What am I going to do? We usually plan these things weeks in advance so that we have enough entertainment ready for them. I haven't even thought of anything. I've never even hosted one before." Kara booped her on the nose. "Relax. It's a study session. I will have the Carl make us something fun to do, and I have the rewards ready for them. Then she frowned. She was going to grab snacks from the Alliance house, but they were thousands of years in the past right now, and she couldn't even access the tiny world. That really limited her options. If she had taken up cooking like Hawk had, she might have had a chance to make some snacks of her own. But that sounded like too much work when she could just ask the Carl to make a construct that could bake. Or she might be able to share the skill. No, it was one that Carl compounded for Hawk, not one that he had himself. She couldn't borrow it. She would have to work with what she had, or put him to work later, when they didn't have so many people watching them. Carl gestured to the garden party. I will take care of the party planning. For now, you have a scenario to solve. Remember, you can use magic as a distraction, but the item needs to be destroyed without anyone realizing what you've done. Rue sighed, less eager to go back to training when there was a chance to make friends on her mind. But she giggled when she realized that all the people here were people she knew. Carl had duplicated the guests at breakfast for this garden party, and now she just needed to know who had the target item. Will you have her work on different items later? Prince Lucas asked. Carl nodded. Indeed. It's only day one of her training, so I'm going with simple to find threats. It's the technique that matters most. We will work on intelligence gathering and identifying threats later. Librarian Barry shrugged. I can work with her on those topics as well. It is part of the advanced curriculum. Rue made her way through the crowd, more comfortable now that the faces were familiar ones. You are evil, Prince Lucas whispered as he realized who had the item that Rue needed to discreetly destroy. It keeps things interesting. Besides, if you make it too obvious, what is she going to learn? Carl replied quietly as the princess made polite small talk. Then she found the item, and it was on one of the girls who had always been nice to her. Presumably, the target of the cursed item was going to be someone that she didn't like, but this was a training mission, and she had to destroy it anyhow. If she justified it as thinking that others were already suspecting her, it wouldn't seem as bad in her mind. Yes, that was the way. Lovely party, isn't it? Rue asked as she stepped beside her target. It really is. Do you think that Lady Kara will be here? She's so funny. The girl asked. Hopefully. Oh. Did you know, she taught me a trick with void magic today, Rue replied. Then she snapped her fingers and cast 2 spells in rapid succession. Void Grab and Void Blast. The Void Blast was targeted at the glass one of the boys who liked to bully her was carrying, and gentle enough that it only cracked the glass, so he had a half-second of horror as the glass shattered and dumped sticky fruit punch all down his arm. Rue put her best innocent look on while the boy turned to glare at her. But being in a crowd, it was impossible to pinpoint the source of the magic from a distance, and her friend was also laughing along. Then, Rue focused hard to cast 2 simultaneous spells again. Void Blast to destroy the item, and Void Grab to pull a fresh glass of punch from a server's tray. How utterly unfortunate. My apologies, I just learned the spell, and my targeting seems to be rather inaccurate. Please, accept a fresh glass in apology, she offered. The boy simply glared at her, then stomped away, and Carl ended the scenario. Spectacular work. I hadn't known that you had it in you, but it seems that once we get through the shy exterior, there is a skilled illusionist hiding underneath. Prince Lucas nodded. If I hadn't known what was going on, I wouldn't have even noticed that you had taken and destroyed the item. The distraction was nearly perfect. A bit more work on your timing and power levels, and you'll be an expert. Chapter 1364 Creative Truth. Time passed quickly with Carl creating new scenarios for them to replay, and before anyone knew it, the servants were delivering lunch to the room, while looking completely baffled at the fact that they were plunged into a dark dungeon that didn't belong anywhere within this palace, much less on the upper levels. Your Highness? Do you need rescue? The maid asked hesitantly. Prince Lucas laughed and unlocked the cell door with a simple spell. You can deliver the food in here. It will give Princess Rue extra motivation to finish her training. He replied. The scene is an illusion I have created for her training. Princess Rue is currently working on a stealth exercise. Carl added. Sneaking around the palace was a time-honored tradition, done by both royals and servants alike. So, the staff simply left the meal and departed, ready to spread the gossip of the elaborate training setup that the avatar of the World Dragon had created. The Shadow Dragons weren't masters of illusion, so the sight of a whole illusionary domain just for training a young princess was a luxury that very few of them would ever get to experience in person. Unaware that there was food waiting for her to finish her exercise, Princess Rue silently moved through the corridors of the dungeon simulation, avoiding the guards on her way to the cell where the others were waiting. Once she was here without being detected, the mission was complete, so she would know that there was lunch waiting. But until then, it was just the frustration of being repeatedly forced to restart because one of the guards had noticed her. Finally, she made it around the final corner, and saw the covered dishes waiting in the cell with the spectators, including Kara, who was snacking on grapes and smirking at her. "So hungry," she whispered, eyeing the food. But the job wasn't finished until she got in the door, and Rue managed it just in time, before a guard came around the corner. "Good work. You've learned to sneak past guards, an essential skill for all royals. Honestly, I'm surprised that you hadn't mastered it yet." Carl greeted her. "But you get in trouble if you get caught sneaking past the guards," Rue complained. "That's the point of learning, not to get caught." Prince Lucas laughed. "She's too wholesome to live." Kara agreed. "You pick on me now, but I swear, I'll learn all the tricks and become unstoppable." Rue insisted. "That's the whole point of the training. Now drink this and eat your lunch." Kara insisted. Before Rue could respond, Kara poured a growth potion down her throat, and then silenced her complaints with one of the royal rank plums she had stored for her own snacks. She didn't want to overdo it, and cause Rue's body to misunderstand the nature of power at every rank, after all. Immediately, Rue's rank soared. The combination of the mana attunement potion that she had taken earlier, and the growth potion that Kara fed her now, plus the bonus mana from a high-level fruit, caused her internal energy to spike, and she pushed right past the commander rank bottleneck and kept going. Librarian Barry smiled. "Well, that looks like it's much more pleasant than the forcible mana overload that is usually used to break bottlenecks. Right? Just a mouthful of mana-rich fruit and away you go." Kara joked. The actual process was the same as what they had learned to do in the Dragon Isles. They were still overloading her body with mana of a suitable rank. It was just the method that changed. Forcing mana in from the outside, or forcing your body to take more mana than it could accept, were painful processes. But your body naturally ignored most pains from digestion. "What sort of terrifyingly effective magic is that?" Librarian Barry asked. "Chaos element magic. It's related to the mana suppression spell, but works in the opposite direction," Carl explained. Kara smirked as she knew that he was lying, but telling the blue dragon that it was an alchemy recipe that someone could replicate, and not a spell that very few could ever hope to use, would only cause more trouble, and possibly mess up the timeline. "That's a shame. If we could have someone learn it, we would be so far ahead of where we are now. Just getting the children off to a good start with an advancement would help build their confidence." Lucas replied with a sigh. Librarian Barry rolled his eyes. "Forget that. Can you imagine how happy everyone would be to have that in the libraries?" Carl could definitely imagine that. And it was why he wasn't volunteering to give it to them. By the time that the next resurgence rolled around, there were only a few dozen viable spellbooks in the Blue Dragon libraries. What had happened in the meantime, he didn't know. But it was most likely down to transcription errors after the system faded, and there was no way to verify if they had gotten it perfect. Without the inscriptionist skill, it was just someone copying a book, and the magical meaning behind it was lost. So, it might be possible to study the books and still learn the skill, but it wasn't a skill book in the true sense of the word. Even with the best efforts of the Blue Dragons, and their innate magic, you couldn't expect a written tome to last more than 1,000 years, and it was at least 5 times that long between resurgences. Even the calendar was mostly lost to time during the low tide of the ley lines. "We might not be able to give you this skill, but I'm sure that we can work out something for you to teach to the others before we go. We're not going to be here forever, so someone will have to take up the teaching position once we've returned home," Carl suggested. Barry smiled. "I knew that the emissary of the Chaos Dragon would be a reasonable man when it mattered most." Lucas didn't look convinced that this was the important time to be reasonable. Carl was clearly hiding much more regarding both his mission and his skills. But the librarian was happy, and that was an improvement over him yelling at everyone who made noise in the library. Chapter 1365 Rumors. Moments later, on the other side of the palace, panic shook the quiet murmurs of the royal wing's staff. "Did you hear? Princess Rue advanced a rank today. I heard that the emissary has a technique that will help her break through again within a month, and then she will be ahead of nearly all the other children at her age." One of the cleaning staff whispered to the woman working next to her. "He gave her void magic as well. I heard that he might be grooming her as a future concubine to the next king," the other woman, a young sand dragon, replied. "Do you really think so? I heard that the crown prince and the librarian are both in the suite with her and the emissary for a training session. What else could she be training for?" Both women fell silent as soft footsteps came around the corner, and a procession of royal guards approached. "Your Majesty," they whispered, bowing as the queen and her escorts passed. The queen scowled at the two gossips, but held her rage in until she was in her suite. "Did you hear that? Already the rumors are started. One measly breakthrough, and already the staff are talking about her like she's a legitimate royal. Someone get me the seer. I need a new reading," she demanded. Her guards, having anticipated this demand, rushed out, and escorted the waiting seer in. The woman was a white dragon, stooped with age, and blinded by the curse of her class. Seers could foretell the future and read the past, but never see the present. Their eyes were permanently fogged. "Your Majesty, what would you like for me to find you today?" the seer asked politely, facing an empty wall. "I wish for you to tell me the future of the princess named Rue." The queen replied irritably. The seer smiled gently as she bowed, and then turned to face the queen's voice. "Of course, now that the curse is lifted, her future will have changed. Every decision made ripples through time, changing outcomes." She began. Then, she paused as she was lost in a vision. The princess stood transformed, a void dragon coming into her own as a young adult. Beside her stood a massive shadow dragon, wearing the crown of a king, as he placed an onyx-studded crown upon her head. For a moment, the seer was about to deactivate her skill and tell the queen what she had seen, but something at the edge of her perception caught her attention. The city outside the palace was celebrating, chanting her name. But that was of little consequence. Such events happened even for birthdays. No, what had caught her attention wasn't the crowd. It was a lone woman, glaring up at the palace, wearing a stained dress that spoke of faded glory. The queen herself stood deposed, wearing rags pieced together from old royal cast-offs, her power level crippled, despite being a mighty adult shadow dragon. Then, the scene changed, moving back in time as the seer focused on the queen. "I have warned you time and time again, but you never listened, even after you were stripped of your throne and demoted to concubine. Now look what you've brought upon yourself." The king was telling her, immense sadness in his tone. Abruptly, an outside force slammed into her vision, as if a wall of interference had stopped her from seeing more of the future, and the seer collapsed on the floor. "Seer, are you all right? What of the future? Tell me, what did you see?" the queen demanded. The seer slowly shook off the pain of being forcefully ejected from a vision, and moved to a seated position on the floor, still unable to stand. "Your Highness, I have seen the future of the girl. Her future has diverged from her past. By the time she is a mature woman, she will have the power to assume the form of a void dragon. On the day of her greatest glory, she will stand beside the king with pride. But beyond that, the future is murky. Something is blocking my sight. I could not see the path that led her there, only the end of the journey." The seer answered, speaking softly. "What of that emissary? Is he part of her future?" the queen asked. The seer shook her head. "By the time that she reaches her peak, he will be gone. He was not in the vision." The seer carefully considered her next words. What she said would determine the fate of the queen, and perhaps of the kingdom. A simple warning, if heeded, was all that it would take. But she chose to remain silent. The queen knew now that the Dragonkin princess was destined for greatness. It was up to her free will to make the right decisions. If she did not, she was the only one to blame for her own downfall. The queen gestured for her servants to help the seer to her feet, and then stared at the old dragon for a few minutes, trying to interpret what she had said. Why a seer would never spell things out in simple terms was something that frustrated her to no end, but she assumed that it was simply that only certain aspects of fate were certain, and the rest was too variable to speak with determination before a queen. She wasn't interested in vague promises and possibilities, only what was definitely going to happen with the choices that had been made. So, she had gotten what she wanted, even if it was far from what she had hoped for. "Seer, I will let you rest. I can see that this vision has taken much out of you, and your health has always been frail. I appreciate you coming to see me on such short notice," the queen informed her. The seer smiled gently and curtsied. It wasn't like she had a choice in the matter. She lived within the palace, and the queen's royal guards had pulled her out of bed to attend to the matter only minutes before the queen returned to her room. At least this visit had been a short one, and she could return to her afternoon nap. Perhaps even look in on the emissary that the queen spoke of and see what happened to him, that he wasn't around to witness his student's coronation. Chapter 1366 Dodge and Deflect. With lunch finished, Princess Rue was back at her training, and quickly adapting to her commander rank advancement. As shocked as she was at her new power level, which was easily twice what it had been this morning, that was nothing compared to the absolute disbelief that filled the minds of their two spectators. Rue was young and trusting. When Carl said that it was normal she should advance at this rate with his guidance, she believed him. But the librarian was not a young dragon, and he knew perfectly well that it was the furthest thing from a normal rate of advancement. Even the crown prince couldn't help but to compare it to his own advancement rate, and see his status as a prodigy about to crumble before his eyes. Is she really going to make it to another advancement today? He pondered as Rue devoted herself to practicing her new attack spells and targeting. Carl had set up a replica of the mage training from the academy, with a replica hawk as the defender, blocking her attempts to hit the targets. Simply hitting the target was too easy for her already, but she was not having much luck trying to get past the defender. Altering the speed of the spell's travel and targeting without making it obvious were not skills that she had mastered. In Carl's mind, it wasn't really important to focus on this part of her training, as she would have plenty of time after he left to master the techniques. But he planned to make it the contest for tomorrow with the other kids, and for that reason alone, she needed to be the best at it. Everyone knew that she was just starting, so they would have very low expectations for her. Being able to even keep up with the others would be a huge win for her reputation. But her stamina also needed work, the same as any other new mage, and when she had to sit to take a break, Librarian Barry was immediately on Carl with questions. All right, now I need to know. What other skills do you have for teaching? Can you just force your student to learn anything that you want? Are there restrictions? Can you do it for anyone? He began, his words flowing together without time for Carl to answer. Carl spent a few seconds wondering how he could even explain this in a way that would make sense. The skills I can teach are limited to ones that I know, or a compound of skills that I know. But the more complex the skill, the more extreme the restrictions. For example, mana suppression is an artifact-grade skill. The only people who could possibly learn it would have to already possess a significant understanding of the fundamental rule of mana manipulation. They would need an affinity for both high and low mana environments, and possibly other restrictions that aren't as obvious. But if I just wanted to teach someone how to use a lightning bolt, then most mages, shamans, and blue dragons should be able to learn it. Even warrior-class blue dragons have a chance to learn lightning bolt. I suspect that if they could, it might even open a Mystic Knight-type class for them, as they would be on the path of mixing blades and magic. Carl explained. And what is the source of this strange ability? The librarian asked. The same as the rest of my skills, I suppose. I have become the avatar of the world dragon, so I will just say that the system is the reason. Carl replied with a shrug. Librarian Barry smiled. So, they're from your skill tree, not a fortuitous encounter. That is a good sign. It means that there might be another who might have a similarly useful skill for training young dragons. Carl hadn't thought about it that way. He was certainly the only one in his own time that had these particular skills, at least to public knowledge. But this time was much further into a resurgence, so there might actually be a few others who had a similar skill set within the Dragon Isles. Prince Lucas frowned, the black orbs of his eyes narrowing in suspicion. What I gather from this discussion is that you plan to secretly teach the princess more skills that will help her growth, and guide her toward whatever goal you were sent her for. Carl shook his head. You're only half right. I will teach her more secret skills, but it's not toward a goal that I was sent here for, but one that she set for herself. And what goal might that be? Carl smiled at the annoyed shadow dragon. That's a secret too. Perhaps you can get her to tell you, but it's not my secret to share. Lucas gave him a sad smile. With how poorly our brothers behave, I highly doubt that she trusts me enough to open up about anything resembling her deepest secrets. But that's fine, I will figure it out given a bit of time. I do enjoy a good puzzle. More importantly, is it possible to teach someone to make this training ground? That magic is entirely too useful, and it's a shame that it's not available for more of the noble young dragons. Carl shrugged. It's not impossible that someone will learn it, but who has enough affinity for illusion magic to make the domain? If they can do that, then the other spells that go with it are not impossible. However, it's not that challenging to modify the gargoyle spell to create a flying defender to protect targets. Surely, someone here knows that spell. Librarian Barry smiled. I know the gargoyle spell. Carl nodded. Then you can use a standard training ground with durable targets for the purpose. Originally, I had a Dragonhawk serve as the defender. They're especially enthusiastic about the job if you have a water mage in the group. Chapter 1367 Learning to be Social. After a full day of practice, Princess Rue was feeling quite confident with her skills when the next morning came around, and it was time to meet the nobles she had invited over in the dining room. This was a mission that Kara had set for her. The transformed badger would not be there to help her through the awkward parts, or to serve as a mythic-ranked deterrent factor, so the princess would have to make a good impression all by herself. Good morning, everyone. She greeted her age mates as everyone gathered at the table. Good morning, princess. They chorused back, then looked around for Kara. Miss Kara won't be dining with us this morning. She is busy preparing something with emissary Carl, Rue explained. A few of the children looked sad to hear that the strange girl wouldn't be with them. Kara had so many fun ideas that she had instantly made friends with the most curious of the young dragons. So, not seeing her for the morning was a real loss, even if they were likely to see her later while they were visiting Rue. Did you make plans for the morning? One of the boys asked, unsure if Rue could come up with something decent on her own. Emissary Carl agreed to help set up a special area for us using his illusions. It's going to be fabulous, I'm certain. I was hoping to keep the details a secret, so it doesn't ruin the surprise, but you won't need to bring anything special. Rue insisted. Oh, that should be fun. The staff have been talking about his illusionary domain all night. Do you think that he will teach it to you? The boy replied. Rue shrugged. I'm not sure if I'll be compatible with it. My class specializes in void magic, and illusions are different. But if I am, I definitely want that spell. Is it that cool? One of the girls asked. You have no idea. It's like a whole separate space. It's not just a little spell that changes the look of a room. You'll see. It's wonderful. The kids chatted as they ate, and then everyone followed Rue through the castle, unsure where they were going. Everyone knew that Rue had been moved to stay with emissary Carl, but most of the kids didn't know where he was staying. Oh, you got the good spots over the library. It's always empty up here, so it's no fun to play in. But the rooms are so big. One of the boys commented. Rue smiled. Yeah, it's a really nice room. Librarian Barry loves that it's so close to the library so he can come to watch the training. The emissary knows so much cool magic that it's impossible to send the blue dragon away. The other kids giggled at the thought of the dignified librarian pouting about not getting to see a new spell. That would be quite the sight. Then, the door to the suite opened, and the kids found themselves looking out over a massive garden space with floating targets, an aerial obstacle course, and tables full of snacks guarded by foxkin maids. This is, holy goddess, it is, I don't know the word for this, but awesome doesn't even begin to cover it. Where even are we? One of the boys, a commander-ranked shadow dragon whelp from a noble family, gasped. Right? Ooh, they've got the good lemon cakes. Rue replied. Carl laughed, as they had just finished breakfast. But the little dragons all had an insatiable sweet tooth. Normally, the older dragons would keep it in check by not allowing them to have sweets except at certain times, but Carl had simply asked the kitchen to load them up for the day, and promised that he would make them work off the sugar rush before sending them back home at the end of the morning. Most of the kids had family events on their day off, so they couldn't stay all day. But Carl knew that some of them would surely want to. Rue grabbed a sweet, and then spun to face the other dragons. Welcome, everyone. This is today's party spot. Master Carl, what did you prepare? Do we get to do skill targeting? Rue asked with a gesture toward the flying targets. Indeed, but I have increased the difficulty. Carl joked, then summoned a clone of Hawk as he was now, but reduced to commander rank so he wasn't more powerful than most of the kids. This will be the goalie. He will try to stop your skills from hitting the targets. Your goal is to hit as many as possible without moving from behind the line of stone in the garden. Carl explained. Kara demonstrated by hurling a dozen balls of disintegrate toward multiple targets. The dark fire phoenix countered them with a wave of flame that destroyed them all in one shot as it circled overhead. I do hope that everyone wants to play. Even the warriors can get in on the action. It doesn't matter what skill you use, only that it can reach. For most of the kids that meant it would be near their maximum range, but they could do it. Don't worry, I have games to play on the ground afterward, so it's not all the same classes who have the advantage. Carl joked. He gestured to one of the foxkin maids, who drew an elegant rapier and gracefully leapt into a large stone circle in the garden that would work as a combat arena. One of the warriors scoffed. You think that a commander rank beastkin is a match for us? Don't you underestimate us too much? Carl smiled. You can play over there first if you'd like. Fastest to land a strike on the maid wins, and everyone who manages it gets an extra slice of cake. Now he was speaking their language. The kids were torn between the two options, but a number of the warriors ran straight to the combat arenas, as they struggled to reach 20 meters with their skill, and didn't want to embarrass themselves. Rue gave Carl a grateful smile. He had thought of everything for her. Next time she hosted an event, she would definitely remember this. Chapter 1368, The Real Challenges. The ringing of blades caught the attention of most of the dragons, who went to watch the two warriors fighting the maids. The young dragons had skills, and had been training all their young lives to be the best that they could be. But the maids were made with the gargoyle spell, and were not only more agile than the kids but faster and in some cases smarter. Landing a blow on them was not going to be easy. Skirts twirled as they parried and dodged, easily swatting away skills and landing strikes on the guests with their blunted blades. Carl had placed healing totems in the garden, so the bruises vanished within seconds. But the proud dragons did not forget the pain of being hit by the beastkin dressed as the lowest servants. Are those real beastkin? One of the boys, a sand dragon mage, asked as he watched them fight. Yes and no. They're gargoyles. So, they're real and solid, but I didn't invite them here, I summoned them. Carl explained. The boy's eyes lit up with joy as he watched the fights. The head tutor of the royal family knows the gargoyle spell, but he never does cool things like this for us. I don't think that they'll manage to land a hit, though. Carl patted him on the head. Just wait. They'll figure out the combat style soon enough, and then they'll manage to get a strike in. Then a sound of frustration drew both of their attention to the other side of the illusionary garden. Only a few mages had gone straight to the ranged targets, and quickly discovered that the phoenix was a merciless goalkeeper. It looped around the grounds, and they thought that would give them a large opening, but it did not. It just gave them more travel time, as the phoenix intercepted with ranged fireballs. Rue joined the mages, and then the young sand dragon who had been talking with Carl. With 4 of them, they could time their spells together to make the phoenix work harder. Rue was the first to sneak a spell past him by double-casting Void Blast, and letting the fireball destroy the first one, while the second continued to the target. Ooh, score 1 for Princess Rue. That was a great trick, one of the girls cheered. She tried the same trick, but the phoenix squawked and used an explosive fireball to wipe them both out. Gah! Did it learn already? I totally thought we had figured the trick out. She complained. Just as the kids in the mage class at the academy had done, they worked on multiple castings, speed variations, oscillating travel speeds, and even curved routes by the mages with the skill to manage it. Slowly, they were managing to land more strikes on the targets as they learned the ways around the defender. But they were also rapidly increasing their spell control skills. From a table in the corner of the garden, Librarian Barry watched in awe as the mages improved their skills by more in 1 hour than they had in the last semester of tutoring. Competing really was the best way. Unfortunately for the boys sparring, it was not so easy for them to win. The extra cake slices were well guarded, and the first boys had given up when they got tired, allowing a new pair to take over. One of them was a rogue, and he was getting much closer than either of the boys before him. His agility was enough that he could keep up with the maids, but Carl knew that was not the only way to win this challenge. You only had to land a single strike, not win the fight. The first to figure it out was a girl in the 3rd group of warriors, who started her sparring session just as Princess Rue sat down with the others to take a break from casting. She fought with a pair of scimitars, which others thought might give her an advantage. Except that the maid was still much faster than she was and highly skilled. A cross block stopped the maid's blade, and the girl flicked a kick in her direction, making the maid jump over her foot. Then, she did what nobody else expected, and rotated her blades over her head as she dove forward. Like a tackle ball player, the warrior girl crashed into the maid. Both parties dropped their blades, and the slender beastkin was knocked to the ground. Laughing, the maid rolled out from under her attacker and lifted the girl to her feet. We have a hit. Now, go grab your bonus slice of cake before it gets stale. The other warriors groaned in disappointment. Why hadn't they thought of that? Mr. Carl, what are those hoops in the air? Is that for skill targeting too? One of the boys asked. Oh, that's a flight course. Agility training to help build wing muscles. Do you not have them here? Carl asked. Carl loved the flight course. How does it work? The boy asked, not seeing any obvious start or finish lines. You go through them in any order you want, but you have to go through all the rings. Some you can fly straight through. Some you will have to tuck your wings for. And they're set at different angles, so you need to be able to bank quickly to make good time. The boy immediately transformed into a shadow dragon whelp just under 2 meters long, and frantically flapped into the air. Unlike Button, who spent most of her time going back and forth between wings and feet, the dragons here lived in the city and spent most of their time in human form, learning essential skills. Compared to the wild forest dragon, their flight skills were incredibly underdeveloped, as evidenced by the fact that he managed to hit his head on the first ring he tried to fly through. Flight came naturally to the dragons. They could do it from the moment that they hatched, but they were clumsy and awkward until they had enough practice, and the dragons here had forgotten that. They had become too civilized, and didn't spend much time showing their scales or building flight muscles. That would change soon, Carl hoped. Baby dragons should be baby dragons, not human students. Chapter 1369 Garden Races. The garden quickly devolved into chaos as the dragons spread out between the 3 challenges, and the sitting areas of the garden, where they could relax and sip on juice as they watched their friends compete. The fact that the challenges were actually hard was a real change from their usual competitions. It wasn't just brute strength that determined the victor, and they weren't fighting each other, but competing to see who was the best without interfering with each other. Mostly, the obstacle course participants had quickly realized that they could use mid-air collisions to slow each other's times, and the mages had learned to target each other's skills, if they thought that the phoenix wouldn't be able to intercept the spells. By the time that lunch came around, and the very confused palace maids brought in the meals, everyone was dirty, exhausted, and either laughing or extremely bitter about a recent loss. The kids had gained a new respect for Rue's skills, as she had done well in the range targeting skills, and had managed to land a hit on one of the maids. Not even all of the warriors had managed that, so for a mage to have landed a strike without the maids beating her up was a great achievement. It had really helped her reputation among her peers, and even those who weren't here today would soon learn that she wasn't quite the pushover that she had always been. Rue thought that it was a bit unfortunate that none of her bully brothers were here to see her doing well, but she knew that they would have caused problems for everyone else, as they were older and liked to bully anyone who wasn't as strong as them. None of the kids in Rue's age group liked them, but that was also true of nearly everyone else in the palace. They were generally a menace, too high-ranking as princes for most to do anything to stop them, and too unlikely to have any future influence for those above them actually care about them unless they cause trouble for someone who actually mattered. And that was bad news for the boys. Because after today's showing, and the favor that she was getting from Carl, Princess Rue was beginning to matter. No longer was she the useless dragonkin princess without a class. She had skills, she had shown growth potential, and her bloodline would lead to strong dragons with better affinity to nature magic. Many of the shadow dragons valued the royal connection, but the nature magic affiliated felt even more strongly about it because they could get that connection and not lose out on the nature affinity, thanks to her elven mother. With more than half dragon in their ancestry, most of the children would be born as full dragons, inheriting the dragon genes from both sides of the family. But the ones who became dragonkin would still be powerful. Rue hadn't considered any of that. What she was more concerned about was the fact that she might actually have friends. Real friends. Everyone had a great time hanging out today, and they had talked and laughed for hours. It was better than anything she had dared to hope for. Now, they would all split off after lunch, going about the rest of their day, but it looked like Carl would let her keep playing here in the illusion for the afternoon, as Librarian Barry had been hiding in the corner taking notes all morning. After over 4 hours, he would have quite the list of things to ask Carl, and that meant that the illusionary domain would remain the same for some time. "What are you going to do this afternoon with your day off?" one of the girls asked Rue as she waited for everyone to finish eating. "I think that I will work on my sparring skills. The maids in here are excellent opponents, and I want to practice combining my spells and sword work," Rue decided. The girl frowned. "I wonder if my mom will let me." "No, we have to see Grandma this week. Mom was busy last week." Rue nodded in understanding. "I don't know how much practice I will actually get. Dad is always busy with the older kids or the Queen. But we usually do a family dinner on the day off." The other kids nodded in agreement. The royal family dinner was locally legendary, both for the number of guests at a family dinner and for the drama that inevitably came out of it. Carl smiled as he watched the excited kids chatter about their afternoon plans. He was doing well with Rue, and she was integrating well into the crowd. An excellent sign. So, as they planned for their afternoon, Carl planned ways to get the Dragonkin princess to advance again and pondered whether to get Librarian Barry to help him scheme on how to build her political influence. Then, he realized that there was a better option. If he just told the crown prince that he was grooming her to be married off and become queen in one of the neighboring nations, he should jump at the chance. He was one of the few siblings that she liked, and he was set to become king. So, a strong bond with her would seem like the perfect opportunity for him to extend his influence. Hopefully, Carl wouldn't have to guide the process all the way to her coronation to be considered successful. Probably not. As soon as he got things on the right track, Misty would likely call him back. After a few minutes, servants came to start collecting the kids, who had all found various reasons to delay their departure, including a few who wanted to work off the extra sugar from lunch with one more sparring round or a lap around the obstacle course. "Why are there tiny dragons everywhere?" Dakarian, the avatar of the black dragon, asked as he stepped into the room. "I knocked, but nobody answered." He added, "Oh, sorry, we can't hear outside with this particular domain in place. There should have been a staff member at the door to let you in." Carl replied. Dakarian nodded and waited for an actual answer. "They are having too much fun and looking for reasons not to leave. I set up a flight agility training course, and it's become incredibly popular." Carl added. The black dragon ducked as a wayward shadow dragon whelp nearly clipped his head, then laughed as the boy managed to clip the hoop with his feet, which sent him careening to the ground. "All right, I admit it. They need the training." "Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.